So, thank you all for coming. My name's Philipp Puls. Today I'll be talking about developed stage production and what that means for us, what pitfalls we encountered, and how we have managed to improve on them. Developed stage production. Why should we, or why could we do that? Well, haven't we all been there? And to be honest, my code never has issues before it hits the user. But why are we willing to do that on a live system? So the idea is to separate those two issues, my coding mistakes and the users needing to be working with the code and getting something out of it. So in the old days, we did that for a couple of good reasons, because we were able to test with live data. Some things are really hard to do if you don't have data of the customer, because you can't mirror what they are seeing or you can't test their special processes. So working on a live solution was easy. You had the live data there. Well, most of us, or at least most of the ones I know better, are self-taught developers. And this is how we treat ourselves. So why shouldn't we treat our customer this way, if it's good enough for me? But in those days, when we learned, we were still in an era of garage unicorn companies that were happy enough to have a website built by a friend in another garage by another unicorn company. Somehow we're not there anymore. But rapid development needs to be rapid. Yeah. But rapid and wrong is still not good. And last but not least, all the alternatives were really time-consuming, were really expensive, or were error-prone. What do I mean? Time-consuming was exporting the data from the original solution and re-importing, sometimes over the weekend, or you had to find some national holiday, long weekends, bank holidays, to be done with the re-importing and resetting all the indices before the users use the live system again. Expensive, because all those data migrations in the old days needed to be scripted or at least planned, controlled, etc. That costs money. Not us, but the customer, but are they willing to pay? And the last alternative was error-prone, because you, of course, could reenact the changes you did in the development system on the live system after you tested them. So you transferred custom functions and schema and scripts and layouts in the wrong order, and things break and you don't notice. So times have changed, because programming errors can be really expensive. If we make an error in a, say, VAT calculation for a couple of years, and our customer gets a tax fine, they can hold us accountable for it. If stocks are calculated incorrectly, I mean the warehouse stocks, that can be really expensive. A customer of ours was once looking for a kilogram of gold. It wasn't our mistake, but he was still looking for it. Customers aren't always good beta testers. Sometimes they know what they are doing in their ways, but they don't take the time to test. We give them the option to test. We tell them to test. But in very few cases, they really do it. Or they do it so superficially because they want to be done and over with it that they complain afterwards. Yes, that's how it goes. Testing on live data, on the other hand, can be dangerous because you are creating records that shouldn't be there. You are creating double records or even erroneous ones that are really difficult to roll back. If there is an invoice number used and they are still working on the live data, it's hard to roll back. Then, of course, you can sit down and secure all your scripting changes so that they only take effect while you're working or with your user account. But more often than not, you forget one line to take out. One pause is always in there when the first user hits the button and says, it's not happening. And the really annoying thing is that they are right. So, I propose, and many others have proposed, a develop stage production approach to that, meaning that you have a development server. That's the natural habitat of us. We develop on that server. We have data there that we can use for testing, for our own testing, but this development server is only accessible for the development team. Nobody else gets there. We have a stage server where the testers live. Those could be co-workers. I prefer that because I can't see the mistakes in my codes. Stephen is a great beta tester for that. Or even customers can have access there. And to make that a real test, we try to have the latest backup data of the customer on the stage server migrated with the latest development so they can really work the way they are used to and maybe reenact an invoice that they just did 2 days ago on the live system and then compare the results. And of course, the production server, that's where the live data lives, where the real users are working on and where the live processes are running. The development server itself might not be just one server. In an ideal world, it is. If you are working on a solution that is just one file, it is, most possibly. In our case, it is not, because we have many files, and some of them are interchanging locations for the newest version, because we are developing for one customer, one specific feature, so we need one of the standard modules there. You find a bug, you don't want to change it back on the development server, you change it right there. So this becomes the development version. So for this file, even a stage server can be a development server. This server needs to be easily accessible. I mean, you have to be able to reach the files, you have to be able to reach the backups quickly, to be able to roll back if you made a mistake, to look something up, to copy something down to your client, to control something. And of course, this server needs to be secured. You need backups of it most of the times, more often than you would normally back up a user server, because if you work on there, you don't want to lose any work. And in the end, it needs to have a specific encryption address for the development server, because those files, when you migrate them to the customer or to the stage, but latest to the customer, they need to get the encryption address of the customer, and you can only do that if your files are originally encrypted. You can't use the FMDMT, the FileMaker data migration tool, from an unencrypted file to an encrypted file for whatever reasons. The other way around would be dangerous, but this way. Anyway, the stage server. The stage server is one server per customer. So you can't have multiple customers test on one server because the stage server has backup data of the customer. Okay? So you need to be secure with the data, but you don't need to be secure with the backups, because whatever is done there can be lost and will be lost, and nobody cares about it. You can always recreate a stage server with the development files and a newer backup from the customer. No love lost there. I would personally use the customer's encryption address on this server, as it keeps tracking easier, but it could be another one. But in fact, as it is his data, he could also demand the backup of that file for his internal documentation, and then it would be easier if they had their own encryption address passwords. If anything I say here is contradictory to your beliefs, please interrupt me. It's a live situation, not a video conference, and I enjoyed the discussion, so please don't hold back. The production server, of course, needs to be highly secured because it's the customer's gold and we're responsible for that. Back it up, secure it, his encryption address, he has all the rights to that data. So no messing with that. The process that we're using for migrating development to stage, just in short, we have the development file on the development server that gets backed up and cloned. We do that via command line. The clones get then transferred to the stage server. The customer's backups get transferred to the stage server, and then we migrate them together and put the customer's data in our clone structure and then host those files. Clones may come from many development servers, and you need to keep track of what file gets cloned on what server and transferred to what stage. From the stage to the production, this is pretty straightforward, because in this case we only have one stage matching one production server, and those clones get produced all together and migrated all together. And in the end, the production server should be up to date. So we have clones from one stage together go to one specific production. Of course, this is only the plan. Real life might look differently. You're not always updating the whole system, but in our cases, we might be updating just one of the 20 files that are with the customer. And that also means that on the stage server, we might just have migrated this one file so we can test the real life situation for the customer beforehand. Any ideas what can go wrong? Anybody?
Take the wrong file.
Has happened?
Anything.
Versioning is my first point. You need to track what version is with the customer. If you lose that, if you don't know when the last rollout was or what file is with the customer and what file should be with the customer, you can't even control if you took the wrong file afterwards.
Data formats.
Yes. how can we track those versionings? You can have manual lists or text files or whatever. I find that scary. Why would I want to do anything manual if a machine can do it? You can have a script in the solution. Not really good, because not that the script wouldn't survive the migration, but it doesn't survive me, meaning I forget to update the script. You could put it in a custom function. Basically the same problem. But of course you want it somewhere that is still there after you migrate it. So writing it in a field is not an option. So we came up with a nasty idea. We put it in a separate table. Let me show you how. Let us create a new file. And this file now, of course, has only one table and no relationships, no nothing. Okay? So what do we need to get our system up and running? I have something prepared here. That's like in the cooking shows in the old days when they pull something out of the oven. First of all, we need some custom functions. There is the custom list and the filter list, which I will need. Gib Dateiname is a custom function that only gives me the file name. In fact, for this particular situation where the file is not hosted and is not connected to any external data sources, we're not going to need it. But for the general idea, I've inputted in it here because when we try to read all the base table names and all the field names of a base table, we want to limit that to the file that we have at hand and not any other files, because it gets too big and too slow. Then I need a custom function that I wrote, which is a variation of XML to var, which is JSON to var. I have a date, a time, and a timestamp ISO from and to ISO, and that's about it. So I just copy them, take them over, and then we have a couple of scripts that we need. I have here the module info API, which is basically doing all the work for us. The other ones are just to show you how we use them. And then, of course, I want for layout objects, in fact, it's 2 button bars because I love button bars. And they will be doing all the work for us. So what I have here now is I have one button that calls, is that big enough? Is that readable somehow? That calls the module info API, and it tells it that we are in version 1. Basically, that's it. So what happens now is I press this button, and what I have now is a separate table that's called module info. And in that module info, I have 2 fields. I don't need any records, I don't need any relationships, I have 2 fields. The one is just for the sake of it, and the second one is in fact information. It's version 1. Of course, if I want to change version 1, there is a script for that. What can I do with that now? I can read that. And I get this result here in the button bar, or in a global variable, or as a script result, whatever you want, by just saying read that table. And because I have a notation of the field names with the pipe in between, I can then, when I want to read that table, just read the fields of the table and use the pipe as a separator and make a JSON out of it. If I want to do a rollout of my file, I just say put in a new timestamp for the rollout date. And if I read that, I have a new field there with the timestamp. And if you look in the module info, I have a third field with a timestamp. And if we now look really close, we see it's 15/37/31. If I put a new rollout date there and read it, it's updated. Because we delete the field via MBS execute on SQL execute on idle. We delete the field that starts with the name rollout date, and we write a new one. And of course, this survives any data migration. It's secure. I can automate it, because I cannot automate, or at least I can't, writing some dates in a custom function or in a script. But this we can do. Additionally, it has happened, as the world is not perfect, that you need to enter database definitions with the customer. You're there. Okay? So I have the 3 scripts that I talked about before here. So we don't want any user to open database definitions by pressing Command-Shift-D. We want them to use one. And then I can say, found a bug in API. And say OK. And then it opens my definitions. But what it did now was I have a field in last change. And this last change gives me the option to know that me as an admin was here at a certain time and I changed something. If you want to, you can code the answer or the information that you've just typed in. You can code them in that field name too, or in the comment or whatever. Doesn't matter. But it's a comment. I know that this file has been changed, although rolled out. This information will be deleted when I roll out again. Silence? Okay. And of course I can, yes, Vince.
If it's deleted, what purpose does it serve?
I can open up the file before I migrate it and have a look if those fields are there and if their timestamps are new enough that they still interest me. And of course the same thing goes for 2, which means entering the layout mode. Now I can't really switch to layout mode, but I can open the manage layouts, which is just as good. And 3 is the scripts, just the same way. And then we have all those fields in here telling me that something was changed after the last migration.
But we only use these dialogues when it's not the development server.
Exactly. Those dialogues only pop up if the short dev does not appear in the server name that it's running on. Because otherwise You just work on it because it's the development server. Back to here. That's the changes that we talked about, the scripts 1, 2, 3 that we use, because sometimes you do make changes with the customer. So we force ourselves to document this. And in fact, since a couple of weeks ago, we have a new really nice tool for our script comments. Because if I put a comment in here now, say that's my comment shortcut. I also put in a link to our development wiki. And in this case, I would change the module name to whatever it is. I could calculate that. I would change the ending maybe. For us, it's changelog, whatever. And if you have the newest plugin loaded, which apparently I don't have, I will do that in the background now. That might take a while. Then you can click on it, and it opens up the web page on the correct knot. Good. Let's give that a bit. I'll show you later. We were here. And by this documentation, we have the opportunity to have a manual changelog that is outside of FileMaker but easily accessible. Then, of course, there's the problem of tracking which file is the development version, because we have multiple files on multiple servers with multiple users and encryptions addressed. This can be really tricky. It's many devs to one stage to one probe. And of course, our Linux servers don't have a client anymore. So you can't use a FileMaker client as before to do the migrations. You need something remote. So this is what we did. We have two files. We have the data migration version 2, because the old one was client-based. And on every server that I want to migrate to or from, we have a data migration console file, which is basically doing nothing but taking calls and instructions from the data migration. So we have the migration server and the development server. And we have the data migration file on a migration server. We put that on a separate entity because we want to store all the clone files there, and then backups get really big over time. So we didn't want to get into space problems with the development files. And we have the data migration console on the development server. And they talk to each other via admin API and the data API. I'm using the admin API to get a list of the files that are hosted with their source paths, and the data API to control the scripts that I want to run. What do we do on the development server? We back up there with the clone flag, and then we publish the clone that is being produced. We can do that with mbs run shell script as a PSOS script on the development server. And to run that PSOS script, the migration server tells the data migration console the parameters, which we also encode because there are passwords in there and that communication needs to be secured. And then we hand off the script from a centralized script node to a distributor script and then the PSOS on the server. That was from the old days when the data API wasn't loading plugins, but as it is in there now, we are just happy to leave it as it is. We also publish via the data API, meaning we are waiting for the backup to be finished, and then we read the file that is on the hard drive of the development server. We encode it base 64 and we give it back to the migration server, and then put it in a container field there, so we have the exact file for later reference. Then of course we have the target server. Again, there is exactly the same data migration console file there. And this now gets data API calls. We send the clone file there. We send the FMDMT that is matching the server number. We put it on the server in the correct directories. Then we close the files that we want to migrate. We move and rename them just for security reasons, so we have a copy of the file that we want to migrate. We put it in a migrational directory where now also the clone and the FMDMT lies. We let the FMDMT do its work, and we wait for the result of the protocol of the shell script, because we want to know if all went well. And of course, if not, then we rename the file that we just put there, the live file, we rename it back and move it back to the live server directory, and nothing is lost. It's just didn't work out, but nothing is lost. But if not, we put the migration target file back to the live server and all is good. And then we open the file, and all this is done via shell scripts. Any questions to that before I show you our tool, how it does it? Yes?
Do you let the correction scripts after data migration comes?
That would be after the script is hosted.
After the file is
After the file is reopened.
open, right? And then you run the script.
Post-production scripts is that.
Post-production scripts, and if that with an error,
Then you're unlucky. You should get an email then.
okay. So, but migration tool doesn't know that that post-production scripts got an error.
It can't. It's a different system. The one is a system script. The other is a script in the FileMaker file. They can't talk to each other. It's also untimely because the data migration has finished and it's off. Then you move the file and you open it, and then you can do your post-production scripts. And of course, then you error correct for them, whatever means you feel necessary.
Do you need to have some special care for the external saved containers?
On the migration server or where?
When you're doing all this migration to the global server and back on?
As the migration files are always encrypted at rest, and the data API is secured by the certificates of the servers, I think we're quite good. But I have never tried. Yes?
I just wonder, why do you need to roll back over there?
Because sometimes FileMaker data migration doesn't succeed. Most of the times because I made an error.
Right, but you have actually your files that were there still intact.
No,
So
they are moved. I
you're
moved
not
them.
making a copy.
I'm moving them.
Okay.
I move them and I rename them from the live directory to the migration directory. Renaming means that I put a timestamp in the back of the file name.
Just out of the box, wouldn't it be easier to copy them, and once you succeed, overwrite your original files?
That's a possibility. You could also use the FileMaker data migration to overwrite the file in the live directory. I find that too risky.
Yeah, exactly.
And if the file is still in the live directory, the admin of the customer could see that as an error and set the file to live again, which would be rather tricky for me. If I take it out, nothing can happen. He can call me.
Right. Still, I would probably prefer to make a copy for the migration, then put it out of your database folder to another folder. No, I mean, it sounds like, okay, when it's the only copy you have and you move it, it sounds dangerous, you know?
I'll show you. Yes?
Perfect.
How long typically does the migration take, and do you or have you considered putting in equivalent name proxy file for the users who by mistake or even intentionally try to open that file during the migration, so that it tells them, hey, wait a minute, migration is happening?
No, I haven't. And I've never had a user call me because a file didn't open. I do that off working hours, and at least my customers have quite strict business hours.
Okay.
So I'm safe, but in other instances you might want to define a migrational window and tell them beforehand or whatever. Yes?
In what ways are you checking that the migration was successful?
I can show you. Oh, that's the wrong one. Funny. Here we go. I was just prepping so that this file would be offline available. Just a second. Let's see if we get it online. Please. Yes?
Just wondering how you handle post-migration steps. So let's say you create a flag field to say the customer VIP. That isn't in the original data when you migrate it over, so you're going to need to run some sort of process to update the relevant customer with that flag so that the end user can see that. What stage do you do that?
That would be a post-migration script.
Yeah, so you script it.
Yes.
And trigger it.
Exactly.
And remember
And remember
to trigger it.
to only trigger it once. Yes?
Going back to the moving of the file, do you also make a copy of the file as well to get the backup of that?
Yes. I'm not allowing any operations on the files before the customer's data is not backupped. So I have one script beforehand that always backups the full system before I do anything. Yes?
Why do you move the files to the migration server and not do the migration on the target server?
I do the migration on the target server.
I thought you moved it to the migration server.
No, in a migrational folder.
Oh, I see. Because it looked like a server
No, I move it. Wait a sec.
on the slide. Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
No, that's good.
Do you have 3 servers or 2 servers?
3.
Yeah. So
Or on this side, there are as many as you want. That might be a stage server or a production server, whatever.
The migration server is only hosting this
This
migration
file.
file v2, and it's hosted there because because we don't want it interfering with any other thing, and we're not quite sure how big the file's going to get if we keep all these clones in it and everything. So just to make sure we don't kill anything else in the process of.
So basically, you're taking it to the operator.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just that you call the folder make and the migration server make, so that might confuse.
Yes. Yes. I tried to keep the text big and short, and that was confusing. I'm sorry. Yes?
What are you using data migration console file for?
The date, I need a file on the server that takes my API call. I have a customer server behind the firewall, whatever. I only need 443 port open for the data API to reach that server. And there I have one node that is totally controlled by me, that only takes my username, my password, my encryption for the parameters of the script to then operate on that server. Because of course that's a security weak point. If that is exposed and if that script name and parameters could be guessed, that would not be nice.
Do you have instances where VPNs are used by the client?
Sure.
So we just switch it on the server, mix server, the VPN, that server?
No, in fact, the migrational server doesn't talk to the target nor the development. My client does it when it's opening the file. So as soon as I have a VPN on my client to the target server, I can do whatever I want. I just need to here adjust the address of the server.
Yeah.
So what you see here is the development surrounding. Yes?
So in all, you have 4 Sorry.
In all, at the moment, we have 200. But that's about it.
Okay, so you have the migration.
You could do it with two.
So you have the migration file hosted on your migration server, but you are opening it from a client on
like here.
on the machine within the client's network.
Yeah, because we don't want to transfer his data to us.
Okay.
We never want to transfer client's data to our network.
So then the calls to the target server are not made from your migration server, but they are made from the FileMaker Pro client which has that file.
So it's
Yes.
pulling, not pushing, right?
No, I'm pushing.
You're
I'm pushing the script out to the target server. I'm pushing the clone file out to the target server.
Let's see it.
Here we have the development server, and a file can be on many servers because I only read the list of the files that are on that server via admin API. But for example, this file, Sun Systems, is in development on that specific Sun Systems server. But other files on other servers are in development somewhere else. So if I, for example, now change to this server, you see that two files here are in development here. I have the server name here. And if I want to take a server here, or a file to be in development here, I only have to click that star and it transfers it. And in fact, it just transfers a marker. The file always stays the same. And then I can backup, clone, and publish that file that is in development on that server to this container field. And in fact, it's a couple of container fields, as many as we want. And of course, every file, or normally every server, has an override or a default user and password for the files for the migration. But some files might have an overriding information. You might have transferred a file with a specific encryption address to a server where this encryption address is not typical. So this information here would be overriding. Then you have the staging. And in the staging, for example here, I think I can show you a couple of errors. No, not here. Because they just didn't work the first time. Yes, that's a good example. So this would be an error. I got a timeout on the API call. I didn't know if the FileMaker data migration was still running, so it reports an error. This one went well because I have the full protocol of the migration here, and I have the summary, and I can calculate how long the migration was. That was 23 seconds. I have a timestamp, I have an OK. That's fine for me. So that's fully protocoled. Depending on the server version that I have here and the host OS, I have all the different data migration tools in a backend table, so they are always matched. So I never transfer a data migration tool that is not matching the server number. Happened to me before, didn't work out so well. And as you see here, I have a big button here that says do a backup before anything else, because if that backup timestamp is too old, this never goes away. So now, of course, for means of presentation, I would put in here, what is it now, 1600. And normally the script does the update for me, but as I'm not running the script now I have my buttons to control my migration. I can now select which files to migrate, and then close the files, put them in the migration path. I can control each of those steps. If I say I don't want it verbose, then it just checks if the migration was correct, and if not, does the rollback by itself. If it was correct, it does the migration complete. I can also checkmark a couple of files here that I want to migrate one after the other. So you can set that up, go to bed on the next morning, you see if it worked or not, and you can be certain that the customer's server is in a full state, because either it worked or it rolled back, but it will never leave you in one state or the other right in the middle. And of course, here I'm relying on the newest development clone that I have of each file. Okay, so if I select one here, say contacts, I see that the newest contacts file is from the 24th of October, 1635. That's the date of the clone. That's the one I will be using, and none else. Wherever that file comes from, that can come from any of my development servers. In production, this is a bit different because I can put in here a dedicated production server, a dedicated stage server, sorry. And then it would take the clone files from exactly that stage server. If none is specified, the production environment here behaves just like the staging environment, because sometimes, especially for our internal purposes, we migrate directly to our own live system because we're eating our own dog food. In the data migration settings, we are supporting, we of course need the verbose mode because otherwise we wouldn't get the protocol. We do rebuild the indices, we do reevaluate, we keep the clone fonts because we will never migrate a customer's file that is different in the fonts. If we decide our fonts and our standardized versions change, of course we want to take those. The clone accounts barely make any sense to us. The value lists normally we take from the clone. I needed a popover here because keep clone value lists was in the beginning not clear enough for me, so I had to put additional information for me there. And the cache size, of course, depends on on how strong the server there is, and if it is already up to its brims, or if we have space on it to do that. That is about it. About it meaning this is the process that we live by, which works decently well for us. Different FileMaker versions in the past have had different interesting behaviors, but the newest one is really good. It's a bit slower than I think 19.4, but it works like a charm. Let's get through that because I do not want to let you go before my last slide. That's just bad behavior. Because all this is a team sport. I'm not doing that alone. I'm doing that in a strong surrounding. And Stefan Pusch is my companion on this endeavor, and he's the best sounding board I've ever had and the debugger general of all my solutions. If I can't find it, he certainly does. It wouldn't have been able without MBS. I wouldn't be able to do it. And kudos to Christian, because that is the most amazing, most patient supporter I've had in a long time. And Russell Watson, I don't know if anybody knows him here, but he is, for me, the bulldog of problem solvers. If I get in a tight spot with any of my whiles or custom functions or whatever, he always finds time to save me. So thanks a lot to the whole team, and thank you for listening.